Dave Kramer.
I'm going to take you inside. Hold on a second.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Okay, now, thank you. Ay, yo te conozco a ti de dónde.
De que yo fui a arreglarte la computadora ayer, mujer.
Ay, verdad, nena, tengo Alzheimer. ¿Cómo estás, nena? Eso me sirvió. Bien, Bruce, vete para acá que van a salir ahora. Mira, eso no.
Good afternoon, students and faculty of the John F. Kennedy School of Government. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dr. Alan Counter, Director of the Harvard Foundation and Professor of Neuroscience at the Harvard Medical School. On behalf of the President of the University and the Dean of Harvard College, it has been our privilege today to host as special guest of the university the Honorable Sila M. Calderon, Governor of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. We are delighted to join the KFK Forum in co-sponsoring the Governor's address this afternoon. I would like to thank Mr. Bill White, Dean Joseph Nye, and the staff of the JFK School of Government for collaborating with the Harvard Foundation on this important event. Earlier today, after meetings with the President of the University, President Lawrence Summers, and Dean Benedict Gross, Dean of Harvard College, we had the honor of presenting the Harvard Foundation Award to Governor Sila M. Calderon for her leadership and humanitarian initiatives. I would like to show you, since it's been presented, the award, which is the Harvard Foundation Award, and it reads, again, to mark the occasion of her visit to Harvard and to recognize her distinguished leadership in government and humanitarian initiatives. Signed, President Lawrence Summers, Dean of the College, Benedict Gross, and myself, S. Allen Counter. So let's give another round of applause to our I would like to invite one of the students from the Cambridge Public Schools forward. It is my privilege to present at this time from the Mariah Baldwin School, Miss Olivia Counter, our 11-year-old student. Olivia? Speak up loudly.
Governor, these flowers are from you on behalf of all the children of Cambridge. Gracias.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Sila M. Calderon was born on September 23, 1942 in San Juan, Puerto Rico. She attended school at the Convent of the Sacred Heart in San Juan and graduated as class valedictorian. She then matriculated at Manhattanville College in Purchase, New York, and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in government. Later, she went on to graduate school in public administration at the School of Public Administration at the Universidad Puerto Rico. Governor Calderon became the first woman to be named Chief of Staff for the Governor of Puerto Rico in 1985. 2 years later, she was named Secretary of State and was in charge of all the day-to-day operations of the government of Puerto Rico. For the first time in 1995, Calderon ran for the position of mayor of San Juan and won by a huge margin. During her time as mayor, she worked closely with poor communities that badly needed improvements in housing, social services, and economic development. In November 2000, she was elected as governor of Puerto Rico with a very successful political initiative in which she used the slogan, "We want change." She is the first woman to serve as governor of Puerto Rico. During her first months as governor, she focused on building the foundations for her economic development, drug control, public education, child abuse, and tourism policies. Helping the less fortunate to have a greater say in their future has become an important part of Governor Calderon's vision for Puerto Rico. A woman of courage, integrity, honor, and distinction, it is my privilege to present to you Governor Sila M. Calderon. Thank you.
Members of the faculty, graduate fellows, distinguished guests, alumni, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to begin my remarks today by thanking the university, in particular President Summers, Dr. Counter, and Director White for this invitation. I've had a wonderful day at Harvard, and I want to thank also the school for this opportunity to address it this afternoon. The government of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico has had its share of Harvard graduates. Some of them are here with me today, and I would like them to stand up. Our budget director, Melba Costa. Our Secretary of Natural Resources, Luis Ricky Rodriguez. My advisor on financial and economic affairs, Iram Ramirez. They are all doing a terrific job. Also here with me today, somewhere, I hope, is my son, Francisco Gonzalez, who graduated with the college class of '89 and received his Harvard MBA in '93. Are you around, Francisco? He's not around. He must be on some kind of a conference call, which he's always doing. And I'm also very honored to have here with us today the president of the University of Puerto Rico, Antonio Garcia Padilla. Even though he's not a Harvard graduate, he went to Yale. So I think that's pretty good too. Tony, thank you for being here. These young men and women are but a few of a group of remarkable Puerto Ricans who have joined me in a remarkable journey to set our government on the right track once again. And rectifying the course of government is precisely what we have been doing in the last 3 very difficult years. For what happened in Puerto Rico is almost a case study of what can go wrong when a government loses sight of the core values it is supposed to represent. Let me start by giving you some facts about Puerto Rico. For half a century, Puerto Rico and the United States have shared a unique Commonwealth relationship, combining the best of American democracy and ideals with Puerto Rico's vibrant culture and heritage. It has allowed our people to govern themselves, to affirm their cultural personality within the federal framework. And it has also enabled us to retain the U.S. citizenship we cherish. It has also provided a powerful tool for economic development through our fiscal autonomy, because it let us collect our own revenues and set our own fiscal policies. That fiscal autonomy, which entails, or allows rather, Puerto Rico's exemption from federal taxation, has provided the means for a tax incentive program on which our industrial development has been based. Commonwealth also means a common market, a common currency, and a common defense with the United States. Puerto Ricans have fought shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. brothers and sisters in every war since the beginning of the last century, and we have done it proudly. The benefits of this relationship speak for themselves. The nearly 4 million residents of the island enjoy an economy with a GNP of $45.2 billion and a government budget of $23.3 billion distributed amongst 140 Commonwealth agencies. Federal grants account for $4.8 billion, less than a fifth of that total. The rest of our revenues are generated by our own economy. With more than $61 billion in exports and imports, Puerto Rico is the United States' 7th largest trading partner. All this came about through the hard work of an extraordinary generation of Puerto Ricans who founded the Commonwealth over 50 years ago. They built our government based on solid values of honesty, compassion, individual responsibility, and respect. They left us a very proud legacy of clean, efficient government that was sensitive to the people's needs. That value-based democracy they established reflected the finest traits of our national character. But in the last 80 years before my administration, Puerto Rico experienced a disgraceful deterioration of leadership accompanied by a progressive loss of values. In a highly charged partisan environment, politics was placed above the livelihood of thousands of our workers. A government that had been entrusted with defending jobs instead put them in jeopardy by killing federal incentives deemed incompatible with their ideological pursuits. Thousands and thousands, almost 30,000 jobs were lost. And a misguided quest for statehood put economic development in the back burner. The prudence that had been the hallmark of decades of good government in Puerto Rico gave way to fiscal responsibility. By January 2001, when I took oath of office as governor, this had resulted in a large deficit of over $500 million. In addition, there were debts amounting to $1.6 billion hidden in the books of the Government Development Bank, the island's fiscal agent, bringing this very important institution to the verge of bankruptcy. Another $540 million worth of past due unpaid debts were also found. An ill-conceived health reform and sloppy negotiations with insurance companies had left the healthcare cost spiraling up to nearly $1.7 billion. And large public construction projects were poorly planned and mismanaged were hugely over budgeted. Yet, more damaging than all that was the corruption that sapped the faith of our people in their public institutions. Even after I came into office, on the evening news, on TV, night after night, we watched as a corrupted class of former leaders were exposed, indicted, and jailed. An entire who's who of political elites fell from grace, including such high-ranking officials as the former Secretary of Education, the former Governor's Deputy Chief of Staff, the former Speaker of the House, and many other ex-senior members of the past administration. We also saw scores of friends, contractors, and contributors to the then majority political party facing similar charges. It seemed as though no part of government was spared from corruption. Illegal scams at the education department, at the social and housing departments, resulted in frozen federal funds, which were badly needed for our poor families. We were concerned, and I was particularly concerned, that the children of Puerto Rico would become accustomed to seeing their public figures handcuffed and jailed on corruption charges. We worried that these children would be forever burdened with a jaded but perhaps justified contempt for public service. What we were witnessing was a government the Commonwealth founders would hardly have recognized. I had campaigned on a clean government platform, convinced that it was time to rethink our priorities. Politicians had become fixated on debating the island's status, ignoring more pressing needs, and at the expense of the citizens we were supposed to serve. The people agreed with me, and we began in the year 2001 an overhaul once I was sworn as governor. We set out to rescue the core values we had departed from. The core values we had departed from. We began by strengthening finances and putting jobs and economic development back at the top of our priorities. And we were determined to give the people the clean government that they wanted and that they deserved. We restructured our debt. We sought long-term financing for the unpaid bills. We identified new sources of revenues, such as sin taxes and stricter tax debt collections. And can you imagine? Everybody complained a lot. Nobody ever is happy when they are taxed. We saved $600 million over 2 years by cutting spending, and through tough negotiations, we brought down the health reform costs. Taking advantage of our fiscal autonomy, we also implemented new initiatives to encourage business expansions and economic development. Over 15 new tax incentive laws were approved and signed. We put in place a 12-point economic development plan that ranged from expediting the permit process for new construction and promoting job retraining to lowering the cost of doing business in Puerto Rico and undertaking key strategic projects around the island. At the same time, while providing incentives to the private sector, the government redoubled and sped up investment in infrastructure, beginning a sorely needed rebuilding program. That rebuilding program up to this year has already injected nearly $5 billion into our economy. It has been a very long and very difficult journey these last 3 years. And believe me, it continues to be difficult. But I am pleased to report today that we're gradually bringing prudence and values back to government. We also rescued something very important, our forgotten sense of compassion. The first law I signed as governor was to create the Special Communities Project, modeled on a local program I had started earlier as mayor of San Juan. The program is aimed at the poor, disadvantaged communities all over Puerto Rico, and is based on the simple premise of empowerment. We designated 686 of these special communities, or barrios, very, very poor barrios all over Puerto Rico, impacting a total of more than 1 million Puerto Ricans that now live under the poverty levels. Because we had strengthened our government's financial health, last year we were able to allocate $1 billion to Puerto Rico Special Communities projects. This is an unprecedented amount to improve the most basic of living conditions of the dispossessed in our island. From new homes to street lights to modern sewage systems, we're working hard with the residents to bring back hope and respect and dignity and optimism to places that had long been forgotten. The economy, the infrastructure, and doing justice to our people were not the only challenges. Above all, we needed clean government again. We moved to establish new laws, conducted external audits of public agencies, increased funding to combat corruption, and demanded ethical training for everybody, each and every person that draws a government salary. And most importantly, there was a new attitude, a governor that would take immediate action, which I have done at the slightest hint of irregular use of public funds regarding or disregarding of where it came from or who was involved or what party the person belonged to. We committed ourselves to bringing back the principles and virtues that guided our founders. We have been taking the necessary investments that are needed to keep the foundation of democracy strong, because the foundations of democracy are values and its trust. And we made sure that the values and ethics being reinstituted in government became part of a new core curriculum for our children as well. This was something that had never been done before in Puerto Rico. And to put this new curriculum into place, we worked with community, religious, university, and civic groups. As a matter of fact, Mr. Garcia Padilla was one of the persons who helped in putting together this new curriculum. Hundreds of thousands of children in our public schools now talk about values in the classroom every single day. Teachers, no matter what the subject, are being trained in ethical education, and they have to incorporate it into their daily lessons as a requisite. In our schools today, there are discussions on the ethical dimensions of every subject. There are workshops on problem solving, workshops on conflict solution, healthy ways of settling disputes, and on the basic requirements for a culture of peace. When planted into young minds, hopefully, ethical seeds will grow into lasting values. In just 3 years, we have come a long way. The results are showing. We have created more than 80,000 new jobs. We have a record historic level of employment, with over 1.2 million people working right now in Puerto Rico. Some 3,000 new hotel rooms are under construction, and hotel occupancy is better than ever. Retail sales have risen. Over 22,000 new units of low-income housing are being built. And in recent years, more than $2.2 billion have been invested by the private sector in over 450 new industries. And by the end of this administration, we will have invested, the government, more than $7 billion in the island's infrastructure, which is the largest public improvements program in the history of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's fiscal situation has also been strengthened. Federal agencies have regained confidence in our government and have released frozen funds, even increased them. Rating agencies have upgraded the quality of our bonds. Our values-based approach to restoring confidence in our public institutions is working. It has not been easy. It has not been easy. In fact, in a highly charged political environment, it continues to be hard, and I can foresee many more battles ahead. But I must share this with you. Recently, I got a letter from a constituent that struck a chord in my soul, and I would like to share it with you today. It was from my young mother, a person from a disadvantaged background who, through one of our new programs, had been able to realize the dream of her life to acquire a new home, a house. And this is what she wrote to me, and I quote her. In these times we live in, it is very difficult to find people who seek to do good without wanting something in return or credit for what they do. In the past elections, I was expecting my child, and something deep inside me told me, I should support you. So I decided to work for your candidacy in my hometown, which was a bastion of the opposition. But I didn't care, and I worked anyway, with my huge belly and all. And I'm glad you have done it. And I'm glad to have done it, because you won, and you did not let us down. You have known how to move Puerto Rico along a good path, just as I expected that you would. I urge you to go forward and never stop, because God observes everything and rewards us doubly for the good we do. This is part of the letter she sent me. And I ask you, isn't that ultimately why we're here? Doing justice, lending a hand, raising hopes, lifting the people's spirits. Nothing can be more worthwhile or gratifying. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say to you today that sound government is not merely good management. It is never about profit or about a single bottom line. And it is not just about efficiency. It is about balance, about fairness, about justice. It is not only the effective administration of the public assets, it is the acceptance and trust of an even greater treasure, that of the people's deepest hopes and aspirations. For government is about inspiring others with a vision of the future that they can make their own. It is about interpreting the dreams of a people and help them to come true. And in the end, government is a way to instill, to rescue, and to strengthen those very values we all deem to be good. The principles which are so essential if government is to be a mirror of the best within ourselves. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, at the very core of what representative democracy is. If government is to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, it must reflect who they are, or better yet, who they wish to be. Democracy in Puerto Rico has been tested to levels never before in our history. But it has survived. And I am very confident that we will come out of this much stronger and even more determined to meet new challenges. I tell you today that with hard work and nurturing, I know And I trust that our democracy will thrive not only for the good of today's generations, but for the many, many others that will follow in our wake. I thank you so much for inviting me today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Governor Calderon. The governor has kindly agreed to answer some questions from our students and faculty. We have microphones set up on either side of the room. Mr. Bill White, who is director of the IOP, has reminded me that we would like to have questions from our students, hopefully not speeches. We want to take full advantage of the governor's time here. So we would welcome questions at the microphone. And I remind you that we are indeed at Harvard tremendously proud of our civility here. So thank you very much. Your first question for Governor Calderon.
Buenas tardes, Gobernadora.
Buenas tardes.
I'm speaking English, and hopefully that'll work out. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But by having been raised there and by having lived there...
I'm sorry?
By having been raised there, by having lived there all my life, and by having been surrounded by the importance that politics plays in people's lives, I have so many questions, but this is the one that I've chosen to ask you. It's hard to ignore the apparent inability of politicians to keep partisan rivalry at bay.
I can hardly, could you
Sure.
near the
Okay.
microphone? I can.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. It's hard to ignore the apparent inability of politicians to keep partisan rivalry at bay. It seems clear that this diminishes the trust that we can have in the government, as you've mentioned, and that this long-standing trend distracts from real issues and prevents politicians from being effective. What do you think needs to change on the part of both the public and the people in the government in order to make political campaigns less about private gossip and more about achieving political goals?
Well, that's an extremely good observation and question. I think partisan politics, particularly in countries or islands, places like Puerto Rico, are very, very charged and highly charged, as I said here, very divisive and sometimes very harmful to the governmental process. We must begin by campaigns, and campaigns turn out to be, instead of about issues, they turn out to be about personal and political attacks. I think the public has to make a decision, the citizens have to make a decision, the constituents, to elect those people that really come to them and talk to them about issues, and people they can trust and know that they will put their money where their mouth is, that they will keep their word. And I think that is the basis of democracy. It's for the people to do that. It's for the people, with their vote, to support those candidates who are true to their word.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another question from the governor from this young man.
Hello, my name is Adrián Maldonado. I'm born and raised in Rio Piedras and Alto Rey,
Oh, nice.
and a graduate of Antilles High School in Fort Buchanan. And in light of, I just wanted to ask you, in light of the recent base closing of Roosevelt Roads in Ceiba, is Fort Buchanan in danger of the next round of base closings in 2005? And if so, where does that leave us in the eyes of, where does that leave Puerto Rico in the eyes of United States Congress?
Well, first of all, the closing of the Roosevelt Road has to do with two things. First of all, the termination of the military exercises in Vieques, because most of the personnel that was there had to do with the Vieques exercises. And secondly, it was a part of a national closing of bases program they have had, the Pentagon has had all over, or is having all over the United States. I do not think there's any relation between that and Buchanan, not at all. On the other hand, even though I was not for the closing of the military base there, now that it's being transferred, I think it's an exceptional positive possibility for Puerto Rico's further economic development, and we have already contracted and commissioned a study of which we have received a preliminary report on all the potentiality for economic development of the base. Most states or areas or cities where military bases have closed have advanced and developed economically in a geometric way. So this is going to be positive.
Thank you.
I think we have a question.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'd just like to sincerely congratulate you on this occasion, and I have a comment and a question. My comment is around my deep disappointment that you're not running in the next elections, 2004. Thanks to Univision and Telemundo, we are all up to date with what's going on in Puerto Rico. Fortunately, the internet is also a good resource, and so it's a global.
Don't believe everything you say. I mean, I don't mean Univision, I mean the internet.
I want your comments for that reason. I would bet that in such a machista society, it would be very difficult to be a governor, a woman governor, and I'd like your comments around that. And the second question is, there is a proposal in Congress around prescription medication for people on Medicare, and as you and I know, and most people might know also in this school of thinkers and of well-informed people, that all of the elderly people in Puerto Rico receive Medicare as well. So we have always been into the Medicare program through a special arrangement somehow that nobody knows about here. Now in the committee discussions, what kind of work is the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico doing? What kind of lobby are you doing to get Puerto Ricans to get the same equal benefit through Medicare that people in the continental U.S. will be getting if it passes, if the law
Well, the
passes?
first question,
Thank you very much.
thank you. The first question, I have never looked at myself from a gender point of view. So, and I have had respect from men in Puerto Rico. I give them respect. I get respect back. The job of a governor is very hard, particularly in these last 4 years, as any governor in the United States could tell you, because of the economic situation. Has nothing to do with gender. And my decision not to seek re-election has nothing to do with gender or with men either. It has to do with the fact that I've served my country in non-political and political positions for 17 years, and I've come to a point in my life where I want to serve my country in another way. I don't see myself as a politician. I've been in politics for 8 years next year. I see myself as a public servant. I want to have a more balanced life and contribute to my country in another way. So has nothing to do with machismo. And the second question is, we're lobbying very hard in Congress and very aggressively for this prescription bill that has to do with Medicare. And up to now, we are getting good vibes and good preliminary results in terms of the amounts that we will be getting in relation to the states.
All right. Governor, you have a question?
Hello, my name is Ben Molbeck. I'm a master's in public policy student here at the Kennedy School. Governor, it's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
I very much agree with you and appreciate your comments about how the Commonwealth relationship has been very beneficial to Puerto Rico in many ways. I and many others, though, are also concerned that there's no direct representation of Puerto Ricans. That there's no direct representation of Puerto Ricans in the federal government of which they are part. So I'd like to hear you comment on if you see that as a problem, and if you do, what do you think can be done to address that within the Commonwealth framework that you support?
The Commonwealth status was a unique solution, unique political solution to a very sui generis situation. An island linked to the United States, geographically distant, with a distinct cultural and background and different language, but also linked to the states through U.S. citizenship and common values of democracy and liberty. So Commonwealth was a way of making that relationship permanent and allowing us to retain our identity within the federal framework. There were trade-offs. Our fiscal autonomy, which has been fantastic, and just a smashing success for economic development, let us not pay federal tax, exempts us from federal tax. On the other hand, we're not represented in Congress. It was a trade-off. That does not mean that has to be that way forever. The Commonwealth status, which is a status has been preferred and voted for by the vast majority of Puerto Ricans in the last 50 years, might have some modifications in the future. Who knows? That might be one of them.
Thank you.
I'm being signaled, Governor, by the authorities that we have to
Oh.
take our governor to the airport. Maybe take one short question then, but it must be short, and then we have to take the governor to the airport.
Okay, I'll try to be brief.
Okay.
Oh,
then
10.
All right, good. You take yours. All right, thank you.
My name is Sebastian Sanchez. I'm
Hello.
from Guaynao. First of all, congratulations. My first question was along the lines of the last question, so I'll take another one. Having been the first female governor democratically elected in Puerto Rico sets a historical, political, and sociological precedent for all Puerto Ricans, which we could argue has curtailed to some degree Puerto Rican machismo and the many barriers that women have recurrently faced in politics. However, have you felt at any moment as though your cabinet workers or other party members have wanted to give you a hard time or have not taken you seriously? If yes, how could this be minimized, and what further developments would you like to see happen in Puerto Rican politics, especially in regard to other minority groups that have been consistently marginalized in Puerto Rico, for example,
Go ahead.
homosexuals?
Wait, could you say the last part?
What further developments would you like to see happen in Puerto Rican politics, especially in regard to other minority groups that have been consistently marginalized, for example, homosexuals, considering that there has been a recent movement in Puerto Rico, and keeping in mind also that Puerto Rico has such a big Catholic community?
Okay, the answer to the first part of the question is yes. I have had some battles with politicians, but that happens everywhere. The president has them, governors have them, but I've done it, I've fought back. You know, I was talking to a group before. To be in politics, you have to be very tough. And if you cannot, like they say, if you don't want to feel the heat, you cannot be in the kitchen. So that has nothing to do with being a woman. Politics is a tough business. And mixing public service with politics can be a little bit aggravating because you know the correct thing you have to do, but there are political pressures and political barriers to doing it. So you just have to fight for what you believe is right, which was the basis of my speech or my remarks to you today. The second part, I didn't quite understand the second part about the homosexuals, the gay community.
That they have been marginalized. They don't really come out saying publicly they're homosexuals because they won't gain any vote. How could that be improved?
I do not quite agree with you. I think there's Puerto Rico, like any other place, has some prejudice, and there's also openness of mind. From my personal point of view, we're all Christians, and everybody has the right to work or lead their own lives according to their own beliefs. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we take your question, sir.
Yes. Hello, my name is Benjamin Goldman Huertas. I heard in your speech you mentioned renegotiations of contracts in the healthcare sector, and I was just wondering, given certain controversies that have occurred with the quality of level of care, especially in mental health services, whether your administration has been considered renegotiating not only renegotiating, but reconsidering the entire managed care carve-out system.
Well, we have already renegotiated the contracts. What we have to be sure now, in order to get the quality to which we aspire, is that the insurance companies and the groups, the medical groups that offer these services, the private medical groups, comply with that contract. And we're putting into place, because that contract, frankly, has been done with the patient in mind. Our concern and my obligation as governor is to protect the health of the Puerto Ricans who have the health card or under the health reform. Usually these are the poorest people in Puerto Rico. So right now we're putting into place very stiff, I don't want to call them penalties, but regulations to be sure that the agencies and the medical groups comply. We also created through law, and I don't know how to say it in English, La Oficina de la Procurador del Paciente, I suppose that's the ombudsman of patients, something like that. And she's a doctor. I appointed her. She's doing a marvelous job taking up complaints and solving complaints. And for the first time, the people of Puerto Rico have an ombudsman, or an ombudswoman in this case, who represents them in terms of the quality of service.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Governor.
Hi.
Mi nombre es Juan Gómez y yo nací en Santurce, Puerto Rico.
Qué bien.
I lived my formative years there, but I have lived in the United States 25 years. I am now a city councilor in Worcester, and I consider myself an ambassador to our island. And one of the things that is difficult to discuss with people as we talk about how beautiful our island is the perception that there's a great deal of crime in the island. What steps has your administration taken to curtail that, the fact as well as the myth?
Well, actually, crime statistics have gone down dramatically since I named the last superintendent about a year ago. The statistics what has not gone down, what has gone up, are murders related to drug trafficking. We're making a huge effort to atacar los puntos. I don't know how you say that in English, but the drug dealing places, cleaning them up, following, persecuting them, very strict interdiction, and also prevention programs for drug consuming. And we are doing the utmost. And right now, I have asked the people of Puerto Rico, the citizenship, to join the government in a citizenship-sponsored effort to join and enrich, fortalecer,
Yes.
strengthen our efforts by having citizens join us
Thank you.
in this very important quest against crime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Governor.
Good afternoon.
My name is Eric Diaz, and I grew up in Puerto Rico, and I was educated here in the U.S., and I'm currently in law school in the U.S. One of my concerns as I try to look for a job now in Puerto Rico is that some of the opportunities there are less attractive than comparable opportunities here in the mainland U.S. This has led to an exodus of intellectual capital. Many of the people that come to stay here, to study here in the U.S., end up staying here in the U.S., and this has like very negative connotations and a potentially very damaging effect for the future of Puerto Rico. What, in your opinion, is being done at the government level to try to like make Puerto Rico more attractive?
Could you repeat why what? Excuse me?
What is being done at the government level to make Puerto Rico more attractive to some of the people, the brilliant minds that come to educate themselves in the U.S., so they go back there and help contribute to the island as opposed to staying here in the U.S.?
Well, just what I said right now. We are pushing very hard for economic development. Mm-hmm. We're pushing very hard for industrial-based, oriented to high-tech and biotechnology and sophisticated communications. We're doing everything in our power to stimulate and incentivize those industries and those businesses. But obviously, our salary level is not and cannot be compared to the most powerful economy in the world with the U.S. That's a very unfair and very difficult comparison to make. And I urge all people who live here, who study here rather, the young people, to come back to Puerto Rico and give up their talents to your island. The pay might not be the same, but the gratification is immense. Okay. Come back.
Thank you, Madam Governor.
Thank you very much.
Right here. Let's thank Governor Calderon again. Thank you all for coming. I think there are several people in the audience that we should recognize. Former Mayor of Cambridge, Mayor Kenneth Reeves, and there are many other distinguished guests here. So thank you all for joining us. Mr. Jose Masso, thank you for coming as well.